Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Ziad and today we will be playing together with Symfony Console Component by creating a command line weather app. By the end of this video, you will be able to create a Symfony command line, and I will give you some questions with answers, of course, that will help you assess your knowledge in the subject. I have constructed a command line that will show you the weather for a given latitude and longitude and optional number of days for the forecast days in the future. So here, for example, we will be having 3 days in the future for our forecast. And then we will be asking the temperature measurement that we want. Here I have chosen Fahrenheit. It's either Fahrenheit or Celsius. And then we'll be showing a progress bar. After this progress bar, meaning that we will be doing some data processing in the background, which is fetching the information from the web service and then getting it back to display it. We will display the data that we get from the web service in a table format. So the features that we are going to have in this command line are passing arguments here, and then passing options. After that, asking a question and providing autocomplete for that. Meaning if we type F, it will autocomplete as Fahrenheit. I can go ahead and test it here. If I type in F, Symfony will autocomplete for me Fahrenheit, and if I type in C, Symfony will autocomplete for me Celsius. So if I type C here, I will be having Celsius, and if I type F, I will be having Fahrenheit. And then let's go for Celsius. When I type that, I will be showing a progress bar, and then after that we will be showing a table. So let's see together how we can code this command line app. Here on the left hand I have the guide of Symfony and how to start a Symfony project, and on the right hand I have my command line. So to start a new Symfony project, you have two options: either use the Symfony CLI tool or use Composer with the create project command. I'm going for Composer, so I'm going to copy this command over here, Composer create project, and I will give it as argument Symfony project. So it will be Composer create project Symfony skeleton 6.3 version, and then I will give it the folder which would be command weather command. And now basically Composer is going to create a Symfony project on the 6.3 version, and then we will be creating a new project, a new folder, and inside it a new Symfony project called weather command, and Composer will download all the dependency and initiate the project for us. So if I type in enter, I will be getting some output from Composer saying that he will be downloading all the dependencies and creating all the needed structure for the project. So we will let Composer do his magic and get back once it's finished. Alright, so Composer is done, and we have a new folder called weather project that I have opened with PHP Storm, which is my editor. Of course, you can go for any editor that you want. PHP Storm is good for complex project, but for a very simple project like our case here, even a notepad can do the stuff. For the structure that we have here for Symfony projects, it's basically a default Symfony structure. We have src for all our source file, and vendor for all the dependencies that we are downloading, var is for the cache, log, etc., and other folders like config for configuration. So if you have downloaded the default 6.3 version and you have changed nothing in config, you should have here in in config services, this autowire is set to true, and this auto configure is also set to true. We need those two values here set to true to be able to create a command easily. So if they are not set to true, we have to add some extra work in order for the command to work. So to create the command, we simply have to go in src and create a new folder here, which we will call it command, And then in this folder we are going to create a new class, PHP class. Let's call it weather command. And this class, in order to be interpreted as a command, it has to extend a specific command, which is Symfony Component Console Command. If you are extending this class, Symfony will interpret this class automatically as a command. And then to give our command a name, we are going to use PHP 8 interesting feature, which is attributes, and attributes will be like this. I'm not going to write them all, so I'm just going to copy them and paste them here. So we are adding the attribute as command. The name for our command will be app:weather, and the description will be lists the weather of the given latitude and longitude. Now we should have a command that is configured and recognized by Symfony. How we can test that? Let's go to command line and let's clear this output over here. Let's go to weather command, our Symfony project, and let's execute this command, php bin console list, and see if we are going to see our command. So php bin console list will list us all the commands available in our project. We have all the available commands like cache clear, cache pull, configure dump, etc. And we have this command here, app:weather, and our description that we have already mentioned in the code. So yes, our command is being recognized by Symfony, but for now it does nothing, and it has nothing configured for arguments or options whatsoever. So let's go ahead and add arguments to our command. To do so, we need to override the configure method of our class. So let's write configure here, protected function configure. Let's remove this auto-generated code over here, and then we'll be adding arguments. To add an argument, we use this add argument, and the first argument of this method will be the argument name. Let's give it latitude, lat for latitude, and we want this argument to be required. So input argument and required as the second value. Then let's change this and add another argument to be the same thing for longitude, lng, and it will be required as well. And for the third, we'll be adding options instead of argument here, so add option. And for the option, it will have the option name, which is days, and then the short version, the shortcut version, which is D. Usually it's a single character, and then input option optional, value optional, to say that this option is optional, we don't have to specify it, and it will have a default value of 7, meaning that if we do not provide the days in our argument when calling the command, we will consider that we have 7 days as forecast. So let's save this and try our command. To see the config of our command, we have to type simply php bin console help and the command name, which is app:weather. So here we have the description of our command, how we use it. So app:weather, and then latitude, longitude, and we have 2 arguments and 1 option, which is -d or --days equals days, and the default value is 7. So we have successfully configured 2 arguments and one option for our command. Now let's see what we can do with these arguments and options. We are going to use these arguments and options to fetch the data for the forecast API. We are going to do this in the execute method of our class weather command, which takes input of type input interface and output of type output interface as arguments. and it has to return an integer, which we are here returning success, but we can return failure or invalid. So the input argument is for, you guessed it, getting all the inputs from the command line, like for example latitude, longitude and days, and the output is for displaying anything to the user, like for example displaying the table at the end of our command line. So I decided to chunk our code because at first sight it can be overwhelming to see it all in one bulk. So I decided to chunk it into 6 small steps. The first one would be getting the inputs, which are the arguments and the options of our command. The second one would be asking question about the temperature measurement unit, because we are asking the user whether he wants his temperature in Fahrenheit or in Celsius. The third one would be showing a progress bar. Then we are going to fetch data from the forecast API as the 4th step. In the 5th step, we are going to stop our progress bar because we finished processing data basically. And finally, we are going to display the data as a table. So those are the 6 steps that we are going to do in our code. Let's start with the first one. So the first one, we are going to get inputs here. Let's use this code here to get the inputs and arguments. So what I am doing here is using the input argument here to get my argument, which is latitude, and casting it into float and putting it in a variable called lat. I'm doing the same thing for the longitude and slightly the same thing for days, except that I'm doing get option instead of get argument, and I'm casting it into an integer. To check if my code is executing correctly, and this is a good practice actually, we should not go through all these steps and then test our code. Ideally, we should test our code chunk by chunk and validate each step before passing to the other step. Like that, you don't have to debug a lot. So here I'm displaying a small string, that a small sentence that says getting forecast for, and here I should be displaying latitude, longitude as a couple, and then for the next days. So if I go ahead and test my command line, so this, I execute PHP bin console app column and weather, and I give it 45.1 as latitude, 8.3 as longitude, for example, and days, 3 days for in the future. If I type in enter, I am getting this sentence here, this display, which means that I am getting in the right way my arguments and my options. So this step is validated. Let's go to the second step, which is asking question about temperature measurement unit. Here we are going to use a helper provided by Symfony, which is the question helper. So I'm getting the helper here with this get helper, and it's gonna be the question helper, and then I'm creating a new question instance with the title of the question or the text of the question saying that do you prefer temperature in Fahrenheit or in Celsius, and then I'm setting autocomplete values for our question to Fahrenheit and Celsius. It's an array of 2 possibilities, Fahrenheit and Celsius, and then I am storing the temperature unit in the response that we are going to get from the ask method from our helper. So if I go in and display our measurement unit, is, and temperature unit, I should be seeing the measurement unit that I have chosen. So let's go ahead and test again our command. So the first string is as usual, nothing has changed, and here we are asking a question: do you prefer temperature in Fahrenheit or in Celsius? And notice that if I type in C, I am getting the autocomplete for Celsius, and if I'm typing in Fahrenheit, I'm getting the autocomplete for Fahrenheit. Let's stick with Fahrenheit, for example, and type in enter, and we have this message here saying that our measurement unit is Fahrenheit. So we have accomplished the second step with success. Now let's show a small progress bar, preparing the user to say to him that we are going to do some processing thing that might take some time. So here we are getting the progress bar, and notice that PHP Storm is importing automatically when I paste my code. Is importing the namespaces needed for the classes. So if you need to have the namespaces here, for example for the progress bar, you will have to import it here. I will be providing the source code for this video in GitHub, so if you feel confused or you don't know what class you should import, feel free to check out my code in GitHub, which will be linked in the description below. So yeah, the third step will be showing the progress bar. So I'm creating an instance of progress bar here. I'm giving it output as an argument, and then I'm starting my progress bar. I'm sleeping for 1 second because otherwise the progress bar will go very fast and we won't have a good visual effect. And then we are advancing the progress bar by 50, and after that by 50 I'm advancing my progress bar by 50 steps to set the floor for calling the API. But before, let's see if you are showing our progress bar correctly in our command. So I'm going to go back to my console here, and I'm going to clear the console and re-execute my command, and let's give it Celsius for the temperature measurement, and yes, we are showing a progress bar here with 15 as a step. So the third step is okay. Now let's go to the fourth step, which is fetching data from the forecast API, and here we are going to use a Symfony component called HttpClient to send a GET request to our forecast API endpoint, which is this endpoint here. So we are sending our request to api.openmeteo.com, which is a free service that gives you the forecast for a given latitude and longitude without providing an authentication key or any authentication method. So it's simple and does the job for us. That's why I'm using it, and it will provide us with a JSON response mentioning the temperature for the given days. So yeah, we are going to send the same request here that we sent via the browser, and which will be a GET request with some query values here, and then we are going to get this JSON response, parse it with PHP, and display it as a table. So here what we need actually here is an HTTP client instance, and to get that we have to install a component in Symfony called HttpClient. To do so, just Google HttpClient component and you will land for sure on this page here, HttpClient, which is the official documentation of HttpClient component. To install this component, we need to execute this composer command, which is composer require and the name of the component. Simple thing. So let's clear the console here and let's execute our command, and composer will download the component for us, and it will be available for being used in our code. So composer should be done in few seconds. Yeah, composer finished downloading the component, and now we can go and inject our instance of HttpClient here in the constructor. So this is our constructor here. We have an instance of HttpClient interface defined here in the first argument. Symfony will know that we need an HttpClient here and inject it for us in the execution time thanks to the dependency injection component. And we have a second argument here, which is the name, an optional string here that we should pass to the parent, because our class is extending Symfony's default command class, and we should call the parent constructor here with this name. That's why we are passing the second argument here, which is of type string and is nullable. Now with this, we should have an instance of HttpClient available for us and can be used to send any HTTP request. Basically for us, it's gonna be a GET request for our forecast endpoint, and it should look something like this. What we are doing basically is getting the response of our HTTP client, which will send a GET request for this endpoint over here, and then providing a query parameters for the latitude, longitude, which we are going to get from the user. Then we are saying to the endpoint that we want the temperature mean and temperature max, and the time zone is Paris, and we want the forecast for the next days, which we are getting from the user as well from the command line. And finally we are specifying the temperature unit with the variable temperature unit, which is also set by the user by answering the question whether he wants the temperature in Fahrenheit or in Celsius. So all this we are converting it into array and stocking it in a response. So if you want to test whether we are getting this in the correct way or no, we simply can output this response over here with a small printr and true as second argument to say that we want the result of this printr and we want to display a table in a human readable way. So let's go ahead and test our command line. If we execute our command line and give it Celsius, let's say for temperature, we are going to show a start of a progress bar, and then the response is an array. So it's a good thing we have here 3 temperatures max and 3 temperature mean, meaning that we are getting the result from our endpoint. The next step would be stopping the progress bar and then parsing this result. Well, we already parsed it. The next step would be stopping the progress bar and then displaying this this response that we got into an array as a table for the user as a nice output. So let's stop our progress bar. To do so, it's a simple 3-line things. So we just call progress bar and set progress to 100 because we have finished fetching data from the API, and then progress bar finish, and then we are just going back to line. Otherwise we'll have a cluttered display between the progress bar and the table that we are going to display in the 6th step. So this is for the 5th step. Let's check if our 5th step is okay, whether we are showing a progress bar. Yes, so we are showing progress bar with a 100 step, meaning that it has 100% completed, and we also are showing the table containing the response of the API for the forecast. So let's go ahead and do our last step here, which is displaying the result in a table. To do so, we simply have to instantiate a new table and then set the headers to day and then temperature mean and temperature max, which are the headers of our table, and then doing a for each on the structure, on this structure, basically this one here, and extracting the relevant data such as the day and the temperature max and the temperature mean. And then we are into rows table, which will contain the final structure for us, and then we are setting rows to our table to the rows variable that we have already defined and filled with the for each loop here, and finally we are rendering our table. So if we look one last time at our command, we should see a nice display of a table with dates and temperature mean and temperature max. Let's go for Celsius here. We see that we have a nice progress bar over here, and then finally we are showing the day, the temperature mean and temperature max. So that's it, guys. We can go ahead and clear a little bit these small debugging messages over here to have a nice output that looks like the first demo that I have done, but it should be okay. Let's execute one last time. Up, Celsius, and yes, we are showing a nice progress bar, then it's 100%, and finally we are showing our table containing temperature mean and temperature max. That's it for today. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and looking forward to see you in other videos to come.